Services Administration. Today's webinar is titled Working Towards Successful Reentry, Enhancing Career Development and Employment Opportunities. And the presenters today are Philip Cooper and Kevin Lee, and I will introduce them in just a couple of minutes. My name is Erica Ihara, and I am a project associate at SAMHSA's Gain Center and Policy Research Associates. And before we start the presentations, I just have a couple of housekeeping items to review. First, our disclaimer. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation and discussion do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. If you have any questions for the presenters today, we encourage you to use the Q&A pod, which is at the bottom of your screen. And at the end of the presentations, we have some time reserved to address your questions, and we will cover as many as time permits. We also will be conducting a couple of polls throughout today's event. So if you are so inclined, we appreciate hearing from you. If you see a poll pop on your screen and would like to participate, we appreciate your responses. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the slides will be disseminated via our listserv following the event. And we will also notify you when the recording is posted to SAMHSA's YouTube channel. And finally, a certificate of attendance will be available at the end of today's event. And we just like to remind folks that this is for personal portfolio use only, and we are not able to give CEU credits for today. We are able to offer American Sign Language interpretation for today's event, and we have two interpreters today. Their names are Justin Anderson and Kate Lamb. And we also have live captioning for today's event. And if you'd like to activate that on your screen, click Live Transcript CC and select Show Subtitles. We'd also like to remind you to enable gallery view if you'd like to be sure to be able to see the American Sign Language interpreters today. So a quick look at today's agenda. Coming up next, John Berg will be giving some opening remarks on behalf of SAMHSA, and he will be followed by our two presentations, and then we have some time reserved at the end to take questions from the audience. So now I would like to turn this over to Mr. John Berg. He is Senior Public Health Advisor at the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment at SAMHSA to give some opening remarks. John, welcome, and thank you for kicking us off.
Great, thank you, Erica. And I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Working Towards Successful Reentry, Enhancing Career Development and Employment Opportunities. We appreciate you taking time to participate in today's webinar. SAMHSA is very pleased to provide this webinar that focuses on the importance of providing workforce development and career support to individuals reentering the community. If you are participating in this webinar, you know that securing and maintaining employment is a crucial step towards successful reintegration into the community for individuals who have been incarcerated. It's important for these individuals to find meaningful employment that provides a livable wage, financial stability, as well as a sense of purpose and productivity. This approach will help reduce recidivism and the pain and cost to them and society of individuals cycling through the criminal justice system. There are many barriers that make reentering the workforce very challenging, such as the lack of work experience and job skills, being automatically ineligible for positions due to a criminal record, or gaps in employment due to incarceration, plus many more, as you know. Today, our presenters will share about the reentry programs, discussing key features of how they provide workforce development programming and linkages to meaningful employment opportunities to help individuals overcome the barriers to long-term job retention. They will also discuss the importance of supporting individuals to create a career path that will lead to enduring success. We're very pleased to have Philip Cooper and Kevin Lee present today on this very important reentry topic. We want to thank them for sharing their knowledge, expertise, and experiences with their programs. And I'd also like to take time to thank the Gain Center and their staff for their work in developing and facilitating today's webinar. So at this time, I'll turn it back to you, Erica.
Thank you, John. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our two speakers today. Philip Cooper has received numerous awards and recognitions for his work and leadership as a reentry expert, criminal justice reform advocate, and regional change agent in Western North Carolina. He is currently the Inspire coordinator at the Land of Sky Regional Council, practitioner in residence at North Carolina State University's Institute for Emerging Issues, and the executive director of Operation Gateway. And he is also the founder of Voices of Affrilachiae, which is a state-funded initiative addressing stigma around mental health issues in the Black communities of Western North Carolina. Next slide. Kevin Lee is the Director of Special Populations for the Workforce Development Division at the National Urban League in New York City. He is a project lead and subject matter expert working with justice-involved youth, adults re-entering after incarceration, and individuals experiencing long-term unemployment. And he oversees a portfolio of job training and employment programs, including the Urban Reentry Jobs Program and the Urban Apprenticeship Jobs Program. And now I would like to share just a couple of observations about who's in the audience today. So thank you to everyone who replied. It looks like the majority of you today are calling in from urban areas, about 46%. And then the rest of you evenly split between rural and suburban areas. And we have folks in a number of professional areas, many community-based providers today, about a third of you, folks in corrections, probation, and parole, a number of people from the judiciary, law enforcement, academia and research, crisis services, EMS and hospitals, public health. We have our government and policy folks, and a couple of you who clicked other. So thank you so much for everyone who responded to let us know where you're calling from. And I would like to turn this over now to Philip Cooper to begin the presentations. Philip.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Glad you took time out of your day to attend. I've been monitoring the chat, and I'm excited to see such a diverse group of folks from all over the country. Even when she was showing the stats of like which sector you're representing, I want to salute those people in corrections that are here. I want to salute those community-based organizations. I know how it feels to be boots on the ground. That is my favorite. And folks from academia, wherever you're from, man, thank you for attending. And so since we're not in person, I would get you to chant back at me because I'm a motivational speaker. But since you can't chant back at me right now, I would like for you to put in all bold letters and all caps in the chat, I am a change agent. I want you to own that for the rest of the day, for the rest of Tuesday, July the 12th. I want you to own, I am a change agent. My name is Philip Cooper, and I am a change agent. I'm glad to be a change agent. It warms my heart to see how that chat is just popping with people saying that they're change agents right now. That's what it's all about in the work that we're doing, the people that we're fighting for. And equitable hiring decreases recidivism. I just had a speaking engagement with the Veteran Services of the Carolinas last month, and I was talking about equity, leading with equity in mind. Some of these words we get to use and they start to be trending. How we use those trending words, right? And so the word equity, like if we're not careful, we can't let the word equity get watered down, but we also feel like we can have a common ground as it relates to the description of what equity is. And so when you hear equitable hiring or you hear people fighting for equity from now on, I want you to think of fighting for the underdog. I want you to think of fighting for the underdog. From now on, when you see the word equity, fighting for equity, highlighting what's inequitable, I just want you to think of the underdog and fighting for the underdogs. So lived experience matters. I'm all about me some lived experience. I already seen some of the people that popped up in the chat, like my homies from North Carolina. I seen Pam's name pop up. Lived experience definitely matters. We do need diversity in who is providing services. So you don't have to have served prison time to be able to help people that are coming out of prison. But let me tell you something. It is magical when a person knows that you have cooked a casserole in a bag, My friends in on the western side of the country, they call it spreads. In North Carolina, we call it swoles. If you have ever cooked a delicious meal in a trash bag with oodles and noodles and crush up chips, put some summer sausage in it, maybe a pickle, and chop it up once it's done, put some hot water in that thing, let it sit for a little bit, you got some macaroni casserole. If you ever had a swole before, let me hear you say something in the chat. You know, if you ever cooked a delicious meal in a bag and split it amongst your peers who are all having a similar experience, doing time, waiting to get back home to your family, and you just dine and sit in that day room and have a delicious meal. We call them swoles in North Carolina, but lived experience matters. It definitely matters. And there are different credentials that I would like to highlight, especially peer support specialists. So this is for the folks who are in recovery from addiction doing this webinar here. I already know y'all know what I'm talking about. Certified peer support specialists is what we call it in North Carolina, but we also have community health workers, and the community health worker credential has been around, but it rolled out heavily when the pandemic hit. And shout out to my people with TCN, the Transitions Clinic Network, and then you got the FIT programs. They are doing some great work with community health workers, and they're leveraging their lived experience for people who have chronic illnesses who are coming out of incarceration, providing that linkage to care, that resource navigation. But the certified peer support specialist is the folks who are in recovery, a person who will self-attest to say, I am in recovery, and you have to be in recovery to be a certified peer support specialist. On the community health worker side, we're looking more at equity. We're looking more at health equity, and it's focused on the trust, right? Serving as a link, liaison, or intermediary between the community and the services, right? And so the community health worker piece is the one that I'm riding on the most as it relates to providing services for people who are returning from prison. Right. Now, peer support specialist, you know, every peer support specialist is a community health worker, but not every community health worker is a peer support specialist. I'm gonna say that one more time. Every certified peer support specialist is a community health worker, but every community health worker is not a peer support specialist, because every community health worker is not in recovery from addiction. Look at community health worker more like basic training, right? This is where you get ready to rock and roll. And shout out again, I want to keep saluting my people that are boots on the ground, those community-based organizations, because I know how hard the work is on the ground, but how rewarding it is at the same time. Inspire Recovery to Careers, that's where I get my paycheck. That's where I get my benefits. Inspire, you know, shout out to the Appalachian Regional Commission. They funded this initiative. They understand that, you know, substance use disorder is having an impact on the economy. So you have the economic development folks that are interested in what's going on in the world as it relates to substance use disorder. And it's so amazing because the Appalachian Regional Commission, they come with this mindset of a recovery ecosystem. So that's when you invite everybody to the table from these different sectors to say, how can we address substance use disorder? And everybody has a role to play. Like, it was good to see academia in here, community corrections, law enforcement, you know, boots on the ground, community-based organizations, you know, healthcare. You got to have all of these people at the table to form an ecosystem. For the folks that remember the Power Rangers, I think there's some people in here that remember the Power Rangers. And you remember whenever the Power Rangers would take on a big old monster, when it was too big of a monster for just one of them to fight? What did they call it? Let's see anybody in the chat remember what they called it whenever all the Power Rangers came together. They called it what? The Megazord. And when the Megazord came together, it was like, that's an analogy to the ecosystem. And that's what's required for us to really, really have an impact on substance use disorder, really have an impact on addressing the stigma from being incarcerated. Because we're stigma slayers, we're change agents, we're stigma slayers, but we come together to take on this big monster. When you look at education that we're required to do, you heard me mention the economic development folks are interested. So the economic development folks are who really, those are the folks that bring the industries in, right? Those are the ones who bring the employers in. Like, we just had a big old company come to Asheville called Pratt & Whitney. You know, when they came in, they were talking to the economic development folks about, you know, what type of skills are in the area, what type of trainings are in the area. So the economic development folks know the companies before they come, right? And so we have to be engaged with the economic development folks. And you got to remember, like, be an expert. Own that. I am a change agent, right? I am a change agent. So be that change agent, be that expert in your area of expertise, and educate these economic development folks, because they play a main role in getting these folks into jobs, especially living wage jobs. I'm not just talking about just any job, though working any job could be therapeutic, is therapeutic for the person coming home. But if we're talking about living wage jobs, gainful employment with upward mobility, we got to be in the know, and we got to be having those conversations with those economic development folks. And what are we educating them about? Well, we're educating them about barriers to employment. Most of the people that I serve, they come from poverty. They come from single parent households. They have substance use in the home. They never had mentors. It's just so many things that as you become this educator, you become this humanizer. And these are the folks that we want to deal with first. You start with the economic development folks, the workforce development folks, and you want to recruit allies who are humanizers, right? And as you're educating them about, the experiences that people had leading up to prison, you're working on recruiting more humanizers, right? It's all about getting more humanizers, because you don't want people to just want to give them a job because they got a whole bunch of openings. Because 'tis the season that everybody is hiring. I don't know how it is where y'all at, but everybody is hiring right now. They're lowering their standards or whatever and everything because the way that the economy is. But we don't want the people that are just trying to hire to fill some space. We want people that's wanting to hire from the heart. We want people to understand, like, this is a partnership. This is a collaboration. You dig? This ain't just getting nobody no job, right? And so we want to educate them about some of the barriers that the people have, right? As far as like educating them about what really happens in prison, like had to dispel some myths before. Like, people think people just sitting in prison, sitting around playing cards all day. There are people who are in prison getting the whole live work ethic. There are people who are in prison taking classes, soft skills classes. And I don't like to use the word soft skills. I would much rather say essential skills. But there are people in prison living their best life, getting better. Like, I got a work ethic from prison. That's why one of my slides said lived experience matters. I got my first promotion when I was in prison. When I went from working on the road squad, picking up trash on the highway, to being a dorm janitor. I went from 70 cents a day to $1 a day. You know what I'm saying? but I got a work ethic in prison. I got used to waking up in the morning, having my lunch, ready to rock and roll, ready to go to work. You know what I'm saying? And that's where I got that work ethic in prison. So we got to educate folks about what really happens and sharing success stories. It's always a good thing when you can point to some success stories and have those people who are willing to open up about, what it is that they had to overcome. The power comes in the lived experience. The power comes when you amplify the voices of the people. And you see, like I say, man, you're recruiting humanizers. That's why the educational component is key. Like people say, knowledge is power, right? And we want to bring the knowledge to them so that they know who it is that they're hiring. We're not just trying to get people a job. We're trying to transform somebody's whole life. And career centers. You probably got career centers in whatever state you are at. Here in North Carolina, we have the NC Works Career Centers. They play a major role in the success of an individual. Career centers foot traffic hasn't been up high the way it has been over the years because, like I say, everybody is hiring. But the career centers is a major spot for you to get used to being at. Because, like I say, becoming a stigma slayer, becoming a humanizer, becoming the educator, you have to also heal that space. You have to normalize that space. You got to have people be comfortable, because like people getting out of prison, they can be intimidated. Like going into spaces when people wearing slacks and ties and stuff like that, it can be overwhelming even when they go into that space. So accompanying them, that's what we do when they go to these career centers. And we actually have cubicles inside the career center. So if you're looking for a best practice with what's working, talk with your career centers, talk with your workforce development boards, and see if there's a way for you to even partner to have a space there. Because then you start to transform that into a more welcoming environment. Now, with the career centers, like I say, you have some other resources that they have access to. I know many of you may have heard of federal bonding and work opportunity tax credit. These are underutilized, just to be clear, but these are the resources that flow out of the career centers, right? And the career centers also know who's hiring. They know about the high demand industries. That's what they do. And we come in as those with lived experience to serve as bridges, to bridge the gaps, right? And like I said before, like the home base. what better way to normalize, going to the career centers than to have that be your home base? So like, even if you have one of your peers, whatever you call them, peers, clients, formerly incarcerated persons, just don't call them offender. Just don't call them offender. Just, if you don't hear nothing else I say today, just remember, do not call the formerly incarcerated person an offender. We are humanizers. We're not name callers. But anyway, like, letting that be the home base, and you're able to educate the people on the inside of the career center. Next thing you know, you done transform the whole culture of the career center. People want to stop at the career center and hang out. Yeah, they got computers in there. They want to do everything from the computer in the career center. Next thing you know, you're trying to, that this is the hangout spot. You got to be careful. but when you're a humanizer, it's like that. People start to gravitate towards what's safe. They gravitate towards what's safe. As far as education and training, for many of people, even like myself, when you was in the streets, you might not have had a job, you didn't grow up learning a skill set or anything like that, so whenever you do get out, all you know is you don't want to go back to prison, so the resources at the community college are what we're taking advantage of as much as possible. The community college actually has contractors inside the NC Works, inside the career centers, like I had mentioned on the last slide. And being in the community college, get normalized in that space as well, because they have short-term job trainings in high demand industries, non-degree credentials. You got to be in the know about that. Like I say, when you're the bridge, you got to know the resources. And that's what we do as community health workers, man. We are learning the resources in the area, and we are making sure the information gets to the community of returning citizens, the community of formerly incarcerated people that we're working with, right? We're making sure those messages get there, making sure they know about these short-term trainings in machining, or short-term trainings in healthcare, and dispelling the myths and the stigmas. Because, in this day and age, there's a lot of advocacy going on, and there are certain licensures that you can still get. Like back in the day, they say you can never be a CNA, you can never do this or that because of your background, but it's not the same no more. You feel me? And shout out to those people like the North Carolina Justice Center and the Second Chance Alliance here in North Carolina, who done advocacy to change policies as it relates to occupational licensing boards. Like, I have a lady that went through my program, and she went and got her notary. You feel me? And she did time for drugs, but she turned her life around, and she went and got a notary. She's doing stuff in like the business office, so you got to know the charges and how they really impact a person at work. Like, if that charge doesn't have anything to do with what they're doing at work, that's something that you want to challenge, but you don't want to challenge it by yourself. I'm gonna back up real quick. Remember, you're recruiting humanizers. Your allies are humanizers. So whenever you do get ready to challenge and try to advocate for somebody, you're not by yourself anymore. You're doing it alongside your allies that you recruited as humanizers. Now let's talk a little bit more about recovery, because prison in itself is a traumatizing experience. Prison in itself is a traumatizing experience. Anybody in here that has done prison time will know, like, many of us still can't go in restaurants and want nobody sitting behind us. We don't feel comfortable with people behind us because of the things that we experienced whenever we was in penitentiary. So we got to recognize that people returning to society is recovering from that experience. But recovery is the answer. Recovery is the answer, and recovery is what leads to retention. We got to make sure that our people understand, that recovery is a major key for them to be successful and not to reoffend. Recovery looks different for different people. Some people might have recovering from addiction. Some people might be recovering from co-occurring disorders. But us as community health workers, we got to know the resources. And you'll notice, like, even in this webinar, we're not talking just about jobs, because what we got to understand is what we're doing as community health workers, as certified peer support specialists. We are the ones that is working on talent development more from the social services space, more from the whole person space. Because see, the employers, they ain't got time to be doing all the stuff that we're doing. But when they know what we are doing with our people and what we're bringing to the table, then they're more willing to hire folks, and they're more willing to commit to it. We want people who are committed. We want people who are committed to changing the whole person and providing an opportunity for somebody that will transform. You will hear me continue to say transform their whole life. And a job can transform a person's life, their whole mindset, their whole self-efficacy. Like, when you get that job, when you get out, it just means so much to participate in the economic mainstream, and so getting that job is a part of it, but making sure that they understand that they got to work on their recovery. That's one of the other things, and we cannot afford to have people feel like, getting a job is the end, because many of the people that I've served over the years, like, they can get a job, but the question is, can they keep a job? You can get a job, but can you keep a job? And so we want to make sure that they're participating in their recovery. We want to make sure that they're accessing the different options, and I have a couple of them listed here. You have 12-step fellowships, you have smart recovery, you have the Mara, you have some support groups, different churches that have support groups, but we want to make sure that they're familiar with whatever is available, because iron sharpens iron, and life after incarceration is something to recover from by itself. So these are all the things that we're educating. Remember in the first slide, when I said educating the economic development folks and the workforce development folks, this is what we are educating them about. This is what we bring to the table for. So just so they know, we ain't just sending you just anybody. We sending you somebody that's working on their life, that's serious about their life and their family and getting back into society. And as they become aware of these things, they start to become your allies. And once they start to become your allies, they're ready to advocate with you. And those are what you call what? Humanizers. And remember, I told y'all it's an ecosystem. You got to make sure you got more than just you. Now, we play a major role as those with lived experience, peer support specialists, and community health workers. And we need our comrades coming from the community college. We need our comrades coming from the workforce board. We need our comrades coming from the probation office so that we can support these people. And that's another thing too, having that good, healthy communication with probation, because sometimes an employer will say, the employers say, well, I need to hear from the probation officer that they can work second shift. And, whenever the employer starts to see like how interconnected you are, how you piecing it together like a quarterback, it's like Peyton Manning on them, you know what I'm saying? Calling the plays. Then those employers are like, you know what, this program right here is serious. They're about that life. And the next thing you start networking with other HR professionals. And that's what has happened in my life. That's why my LinkedIn is popping the way that it is. And these people are willing to hire folks that are coming from our program. Employers need support too. We talked about the individual. We talked about the meeting makers. We talked about, making sure that you see the whole person. Trauma-informed care is a major piece, not looking at them like what's wrong with them, but like what happened to get them to the place that they're in, and then addressing those root causes. We talked a lot about supporting the individual, you did, but let's talk about supporting the employers. And so Ariana is on here somewhere. Say what's up in the chat, Ariana. She's one of the person that's running the recovery-friendly workplace initiative in North Carolina, and they are killing the game. And when you get with these employers, you got to let them know like the asset mapping, letting them know what's going on, and showing them, what's available in the area. Because a lot of times the employers don't have the time to keep up with all of those things, right? And giving them the stats, like one of the stats, like what is it, like 70% of the people that have substance use disorder have a job. And so whenever they see these numbers and they see how you're the change agent that they can go to for these types of resources, the next thing you start getting reverse referrals. Like there's an advanced manufacturer one time that had a reverse referral come to me that we ain't even sending them. And they was like, hey, I got a guy. I know you're somebody that I can talk to. I'm trying to get him into treatment. What do we do next? We don't know what to do. And next thing you know, we had that dude in treatment and it was easy. He had insurance. You know what I'm saying? It was bing bong, bada bing, bada boom. It was nothing to it. But having those relationships and supporting those employers is a major key. Because like I said, employers have peers. And the next thing you know, you're in this circuit of employers that network with each other, and they're reaching out to you whenever they're willing to hire folks that are formerly incarcerated. So like I say, asset mapping, healthy workplaces, knowing if the work culture is ready for a recovery person, because not all work cultures are ready for the people coming home from prison. But these are the conversations that you have whenever you're supporting the employers. These are the conversations that you're having whenever you are recruiting your allies. These are the conversations you are having as you are transforming allies into humanizers, and it's a beautiful thing that I get to do. The God of my understanding has blessed me to leverage my lived experience to be able to be an advocate for people like me coming home from the penitentiary. And I'm here for the ride one day at a time. I'm grateful to get to do this work, grateful for this opportunity to share about the process. You will see my contact information on the slide coming up. And so it ain't hard to find me. And LinkedIn is really my jam. So if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, we can engage from there. And one more time, I want to give it up for the Appalachian Regional Commission for prioritizing this ecosystem mindset, because the ecosystem is where it's at, because it can't be just one sector taking on all these problems. It has to be a collaborative effort in order to really increase public safety. Thank you.
And we will advance to Kevin Lee next.
Well, Mr. Cooper, I want to start by saying that yes, I am a change agent. Thank you so much for that energetic and wonderful presentation. My name is Kevin Lee. I am the Director of Special Populations at the National Urban League. I have to say that, like, before today, I was actually looking forward to hearing Philip speak more than I was, with just presenting, my part. But I'm with the National Urban League. I'm actually got my certificate of being with the agency for 10 years now. So where I want to start is with, just a little bit on the National Urban League's over 110 years of history. I'll talk about our urban reentry jobs program portfolio. And then I'm gonna get into the foundation of career development and employment, which is supportive services. And we will get into just how reentry and employment are connected in terms of just effectively reducing recidivism. So the National Urban League is we're a historic civil rights organization. We're over 110 years old, founded in 1910. I'm headquartered in New York City. We also have a Washington bureau, but the heart of our work is at our Urban League affiliates. And we have over, I believe it's 93 affiliates now in 37 states and the District of Columbia. So here I put, this is a flow chart I wanted to share. With this presentation, I'm going to talk about a sample. One of our successful programs, Training to Work 1 and 3, which that was funded by the U.S. Department of Labor. The program design that you see here, it centers around a case management approach. The Urban League is very strong in terms of our recruitment and outreach. We provide an intake and an assessment to all of our clients, to our participants, where we look at their TABE. We provide an vocational assessment, and we enroll them into a 4 weeks fundamentals curriculum. What's key for just prior to, everyone will come through the door and say that they want a job right away. But we know that it's important to work with clients just on to provide case management services, to help them with supportive services, with any barriers that they may have. And the supportive services iterative, like, while they are enrolled in our program, mentoring, coaching, providing that personal development. And we're going to get into that in further slides. And then, yes, we enroll them into the 4 weeks our 4 weeks workforce development curriculum. And then we also match them depending on their interests and their background with hard skills training at our local community colleges or training providers. We provide work-based experiences that includes registered apprenticeships. And then the referral based wraparound support is key. Everything that's mentioned in terms of housing assistance, mental health, substance abuse, childcare, and transportation assistance. So I'll move on to the next slide. Just some basic demographics. On our Training to Work program, we had served, just not by design, but it was primarily men. And the services that that I want to spotlight here, I cannot emphasize enough just how important the supportive services are, both during pre-release, during the first 72 hours of transition, and then post-release. Pre-release services, we center our programming around cognitive behavioral therapy curriculum, trauma-informed counseling. Our case managers, they start at pre-release, in the correctional facilities, in the halfway houses, and then, in the first, there's an emphasis on, the first 3 days, the first week, the first month, the first year of just working closely with our reentry clients. But, the key to success for us is really building a lifelong relationship with everyone who is released. And it's, the federal government will have us track, the first year of recidivism. But, for us, for the Urban League, it's really very much beyond that. The customized case management services, it comes in where we have a dedicated case manager. We track our case manager to participant caseload. So that's really, we try to keep it like no more than 1 to 35 clients at any one time. And the case manager is the same case manager pre-release, during this transition, and post-release. And really, this individual helps to serve as a coordinator of services. And you have a one-stop, like an individual who can connect the client to different referral services, to a mentor, and to help them on their individual career and education plan. And then we focus on job training and high demand occupational fields for the reentry population. One thing that the Urban League has been, very keen on, we've had a lot of success just around placing into historically into transportation jobs, into CDLA and CDLB truck driving, blue collar, construction, manufacturing. But I'm happy to see that there's that in this reentry work that there's more and more interest around technology jobs. You know, we have funding from Google, we have funding from Nike and the NFL, and I think gives us an opportunity to work with, you know, because our participants are very diverse as well, like even within the reentry space, being able to have options, you know, to train and place into like into a cybersecurity register apprenticeship, for example. And you know, the mentoring is very much key. I think, you know, one thing that I'll emphasize is that the Urban League, at the affiliates and at national, it's important to us to build diverse teams. You know, those who have lived experiences, those who are adjacent to it, and then those who have the experience in the workforce development and criminal justice ecosystem. And I'm coming back to the supportive services again, and you know, you know, even though we work in urban areas, the need for transportation services, it's in every reentry program that we put together and that we operate. Housing assistance referral is a big one, you know, just across the country in terms of how we address homelessness, in terms of how we work with foster youth and adults as well. Substance abuse counseling and mental health referrals, family reunifications, and access to stipends. I think that within the last 5 years, you know, I cannot design a program or a very good one anyway without providing stipends to participants while they're in the program, because everyone will come and say, we want a job now. I mean, it's not that I do not want to be trained for the long term, but or even the short term, but I think having that access to stipends is very much key. And then obviously, you know, working with our local American Job Centers and the Workforce Investment Board. I have a sample, you know, just sample career pathway. I think it was, you know, career pathways for a while, they were the buzz in workforce development, where, you know, we wanted to look at different career pathways. I think the components that are really key, that, you know, we also see in registered apprenticeships, you know, the need for credentials, the need for progressive wages, the need for, you know, especially working with special populations and the hardest to serve populations, having, you know, in the youth reentry space, we see a lot of high school dropouts and the need to engage, you know, young adults 18 to 24 in a GED program is critical. Okay, so just, you know, getting into the interventions for reentry as it relates to employment, you know, it starts with soft skills, evaluating our clients, just their getting a benchmark for their attitudes and behaviors and their interests, you know, in the labor market and in their career readiness is important. We keep track of their education progression, you know, and their their motivation, and we also work to expose clients to just different careers and fields and opportunities that they may not be aware of, so that if there's an interest in pursuing their post-secondary education, working with them on their Pell Grants, that's really key. And then building awareness of the career pathways and exposing them to those opportunities. So I spoke of this is the training to work program. Before the pandemic, we had enrolled over 400 individuals, and the impact. I really don't think the statistics here will do justice to the work that went into working with the reentry program. But 85% of participants earned a credential or certificate. 62% became employed, and then our recidivism. We have to keep. Our goal is to reduce recidivism and to keep it below a 20% goal. And here it's 95% of participants did not return to prison. And the performance metrics, it's we come back to this a lot, just in terms of how effective are we in our placement rates and our certificate and degree attainment rates. And I have like a daily, weekly conversation with my team that it's not a numbers game. It really shouldn't be a numbers game. We try to hit the balance between performance and compassion. But at the same time, because of the just to be very real about it, like we're always chasing funding, right? And the funders always want to see that we're able to deliver on our reentry programs. So the strengths of the National Urban League reentry programs, they're threefold. I mentioned the incentives. I give this one example here. When I look at these dollar amounts, maybe they're pre-inflation. So in 2022, we have obviously have made some adjustments in terms of what those incentives have to be, need to be. Mentoring, group mentoring is what we typically do. It's just, if in a very ideal world, I would set everyone up with a one-to-one mentor. But our affiliates, they're able to, recruit mentors who have the lived experience or their violence interrupters, and we set up group mentorings to help participants find a safe space and to have someone that they can turn to and work with, and stay motivated and on track. And then the main focus of this webinar, just having that strong employer base, helps to make that helps to place participants, because I saw in the chat that have employment, having a job, it's really key to reducing recidivism. So this is the cognitive behavioral therapy is very popular. We developed it with the Beck Institute. It's a problem-solving approach that we put into the hands of our participants, both youth and adults, and it ties back into we link it with our workforce fundamentals and career readiness curriculum, but the goal is to build just resiliency, and that R word is key, building that resiliency, as during the transition period. And then also, we place our participants and we have we follow up with them, up to up to a year, like after their placement. And we really, I have to say that we stay in touch, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It's a lifelong relationship. Our affiliates are, they are the movers and the shakers. They are the change agents. At the Urban League. I'm here at the headquarters in downtown Manhattan, but across the country and in the 37 states, with the 93 affiliates that work on adult reentry issues, that work on youth reentry issues. They are the ones that are putting together the individual development plans, the career assessments. They implement the career readiness curriculum, work on resumes, cover letters, create that timeline together with our reentry participants, so that that everyone gets on track and to where they want to be and where they need to be. So two examples. One I have, in Philadelphia, they've partnered with Pico Energy Company and also the Consortium for Workforce and Economic Development on a new training program to develop fundamental skills for entry-level work in the natural gas industry. The National Urban League has been, we're very committed to clean energy work in solar, wind, nuclear, natural gas, everything except for oil. And these are good paying jobs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is, their annual mean wage for in the natural gas pipeline industry is $64,000 a year, and that's where we as a movement, how we're moving, in terms of just better creating these job placement pipelines and career pathways for our participants. And it doesn't hurt. It really doesn't hurt that that Pico's CFO and senior vice president is also a board member of the Urban League of Philadelphia, and so it does come back to a lot of partnership building and relationship building. It makes a difference in terms of being able to create those opportunities for those recently released, those who are justice impacted. And at the Urban League of Louisiana, they have partnered with LIUNA, Local 99. They're a labor union, and it's been a journey, and I have to say that we're getting to a better place where we are able to work with the construction trades and the building union, and also the various different labor unions like pipe fitters and electricians. And it's really key to just enabling clients to be placed into employment where, there are better wages, there are benefits, there are more flexible hours and shifts and just safety guidelines. And then what I'll do in the chat is I'll put in a link for us. This is from our St. Louis affiliate. They run a phenomenal program called Save Our Sons. And you'll get a chance to just to see like just what there's a flyer, there's a brochure, they talk about the 4 weeks fundamentals curriculum and the very real need in the reentry space. And while I'm doing this, I'll also put in a plug for our local affiliates. So just anywhere, and I saw in the post that we have participants who are in who work in corrections, or you work with CBOs. There may be an urban league that's in your backyard that you can work with. So let's see. Worker voice. I borrowed this term from. I think worker voice usually it's a term that's used by labor and by the unions. But I kind of repurposed it here because I think, what's key is being able to work with employers who are reentry friendly, and then sometimes who may not be reentry friendly, but moving in the direction of, supporting the bans on criminal history and drug test requirements. I think we're like everyone on this call, like we're familiar with, the different barriers that just hold back returning citizens from becoming gainfully employed. Another point here that I want to make is, just achieving that high job placement rate. It relies heavily on just building the employer partnerships that are going to be open to hiring justice-involved individuals, and just navigating that territory and working employer by employer. It's there's really no silver bullet, like other than just passing some overarching legislation. Like for us, we at the CBOs, at the affiliates, we arm them with desk guides, we arm them with information and resources and tools. I think it's always so important to forever be expanding the toolbox. And then last, we have a equitable justice Justice Institute here at the National Urban League that was formed during the pandemic, and it's a team of attorneys and lawyers and law students, and they're working to pilot our first expungement clinic here at the National Urban League. I think in the past we would refer to outside expungement clinics or legal counsel, but I think we're really looking forward to just bring this in-house, because the ability to help expunge someone's records and seal their just any like history, especially for the youth reentry, our youth reentry participants, but but also for everyone, right? So that's a key piece for us. And this is my last slide. I'm preaching to the choir, but even as we discuss, as we focus on employment, and employment is key, it comes back to reducing recidivism. And we know that that the cradle to prison pipeline, it costs everyone. Like it's devastating to a lot of communities across the country. It's costing taxpayers, $39 billion annually to just maintain the status quo. And so, I think, when I talk about the needs of just more reentry services, I really look at, just how can we, everyone, like the Urban League and all of our allies, Philip Cooper, like as we're working together on this in this reentry ecosystem, it's pre-release, the first 72 hours, the first week, the first month, the first year, and then a lifetime of just of being there and providing the basic needs services, providing the training next, and certifications, and then the theme of partnering with employers so that we move beyond the minimum wage. I love blue collar work, but we can also include white collar, the tech industry as well. And so with that, I'll conclude my presentation here.
Thank you, Philip Cooper and Kevin Lee, for your presentations today, for sharing all of this really great information with us. We've got a lot of questions from the audience and quite a robust dialogue going on in the Q&A while the presentations were going on. So I invite everyone here, first of all, to check out what's going on in the Q&A. And if you have questions for the speakers, this is your time to please type your questions in the Q&A pod. You should see the icon at the bottom of your screen. So I'm just going to kick off with a question that was specific to Kevin. One of the audience members wanted to know is if they could get more information about the 4-week workforce curriculum that you referred to. Is there an outline available or other information that they could access?
Yes, and I'd be happy to share. So we have a 4 weeks career readiness curriculum, and it's a workforce fundamentals curriculum. Just at every affiliate that runs one of our reentry programs, and typically it starts with the basics, right? We're looking for a benchmark. In those 4 weeks, it's like Monday to Friday, 9 to 3, and then during the pandemic, we moved over to a hybrid, and first a virtual, but now we're back to a hybrid schedule, and it helps it addresses a range of just areas. I want to say that participants need to work on during their transition, right? It can include anger management, customer service, professional development, dress, the dress for success, but men's wardrobe, and just having that dialogue. Because all of that, we work on, and I don't even want to say we take for granted, but just creating a safe space for participants to have a dialogue with their case managers, and then with each other, with their family members, with the community, and it's time well spent. And if I could, I think I would have our affiliates spend all of their time just on that. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question is for Philip. Let's start with Philip. So a couple of people asked this, and I know there's some information here in the Q&A, but I think it bears repeating again about asset mapping. A couple of people are asking, what is it? How does it work? Can you speak a little bit more about that, Philip?
Yeah, sure. And so, like I said, the Recovery Friendly NC initiative. Now that they even have one in some other states as well, but the one that I'm most familiar with is in North Carolina, and the person that's heading that up has been very active in the chat, Ariana, and I'm so glad she's here. But asset mapping is when you're identifying the resources in your community for different things, right? So you start to really become like, not to replace it. Let me preface by saying this: you're not replacing the employee assistance network, but you're enhancing it, right? And you're more an accessible person. And a lot of times with the community health workers and or certified peer support specialists, you're enhancing it with people that have lived experience. So you're identifying all of those different organizations that do what, where the food banks are at, you know, where's the domestic violence places, where's the treatment centers, where's the outpatient treatment centers, you know, the community action opportunities, where's the budgeting classes, like we have an On Track Financial, you know, the community college resources. There's just so many resources that go on in the community that HR is typically not keeping up with, because HR has a whole world of stuff they have to keep up with on their own. So whenever you do the asset mapping, you're basically identifying those key resources that any person in the community would need. So it's a double whammy too, because at the end of the day, you can be supporting HR with something that doesn't have anything to do with their employees. It could be something that turns around and benefits them and their families. You just never know in this day and age, because substance use disorder is not playing around. And being that person that is knowledgeable about the resources definitely leads to a trustworthy relationship with HR.
Thank you. Kevin, anything you'd like to add before we move to the next question?
No, I think Philip covered that. That was great.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Great, thank you. So this is for both of you, whoever would like to respond. Do either of your programs assist with obtaining IDs? And the person asking says they often have issues with individuals who are released from incarceration and they don't have their credentials yet for an ID. And so, you know, how do you deal with that?
Let me rant real quick, Kevin. Sorry to be so talkative. So let me tell you, like, it has been a struggle with the DMV, just to be clear. It has not been easy. It has not been easy getting IDs. We'll take a person like early in the morning and sit with them, you know, because they can get there. Some DMVs take walk-ins. So you might have to get there real early at like 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning. You hear me? And wait for an opportunity to walk in. They're also a part of being a community health worker. One of our things we do is advocacy. So there's been some times where, like, when the pandemic first hit, like, you just pleading the case to the DMV worker that comes outside to let a couple people in, like, hey, I'm here with a client, just got out of prison. We can't get a job if he doesn't have an ID. So like I said earlier, with like, you know, you're recruiting allies and humanizers. Like, you hit somebody's heart, the next thing you know, you find an ally at the DMV. But you also have to watch at other counties, because we got different DMVs all over North Carolina. And so, you know, sometimes you want to go a couple counties over to get an ID. The prison ID will also suffice for the I-9. So like, if it's a state issued prison ID, that will suffice. But it goes back to the relationships that you have with your employers, and they will use the prison ID. And then you can order a social security card, and believe it or not, with a sealed medical record. So if you can get that medical record from the prison and that sealed, or medical record from the jail, or wherever you can get a medical record, behavioral health, you can use that to order a social security card. And so the IDs, like I say, it's hard everywhere, and every DMV, it's a trip right now because of the pandemic. So we have had that struggle, but we just had to be creative and go outside of the county from time to time, as well as the employers that we're close with, right? Proximity, they will utilize a prison issue, a state issue ID, because they see that as a state issue ID if it was issued from that state prison.
Yeah, that's, I mean, working on, to get IDs, it's the most time-consuming thing for our case managers. And the funny thing is, I don't know, it's funny to our affiliates, it's that it's not written into any of our grants, or it's not written into the funders' requirements. I mean, yes, we need to like show supporting documentation, right? Like, okay, you need to show your social security card or a driver's license, or and the list goes on, or you need a birth certificate. But this issue during the pandemic was just it was like, you know, you're hitting your head against the wall to help clients like get their identifications so that they can enroll into the program in the first place. I think I said that one of my last supervisors said that civil rights is not easy work, and it really isn't. And those of us who are in this reentry space, I applaud you, and please just you're really in a very special space. Like I just like, it's so hard to, and I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of how to articulate that. But you know, a lot of people work in government, they work in nonprofit, but then to work in reentry, you know, I think that my point is that when I first started 10 years ago at the National Urban League, we did a lot of advocacy around just the ID laws, especially in a lot of places in the South, where it just becomes a challenge in terms of someone just being able to vote, or being able to get access to benefits, or being able to connect to gainful employment.
Thank you for that. So Kevin, this question is specifically for your programs that you discussed today. Are your programs using any criminogenic risk need assessments to match up folks with employment opportunities? And if so, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have the SPIN risk assessment on our young adult reentry program, and so that's it's very similar to the criminogenic risk assessment that I believe that the Department of Justice uses. I've seen those questions on SPIN. I think it's the preliminary one. The one is it's a set of 19 questions, and it helps us to identify if someone's like low risk, medium risk, high risk. But on the flip side of that, I've seen, you know, because I always have to be, I think we're all students of reentry services and reducing recidivism, but I'm always looking at the research, and just, I think, you know, NPR had started, they recently covered just how there may be some bias built into some of those risk assessment tools. You know, I pride myself, and our affiliates and our frontline, we pride ourselves, you know, in terms of being practitioners. Like I will look at the intersection of policy and practice and research and all of that, right? But you know, I do sometimes worry about, you know, just some of the intrinsic biases that might be built into the tools, but we use some of it. The key is your case managers, those who are providing case management services, or those who are navigators within the reentry and workforce development space, like being able to interpret the results, being able to use them effectively. You know, that's the most important thing to our programs.
Thank you. I'd like to pause just for a moment. We're getting some questions from audience members who want to contact the speakers, and they want to know how can they contact you. I'd just like to remind everyone that the Gain Center will be sharing these slides following the webinar, and the speakers have included their contact information there. Philip and Kevin, if you wish, you can also feel free to put a contact email in the chat if you wish. Otherwise, we'll just ask folks to please wait until you receive the slides. And I'm going to move to another question for Philip. So Philip, I see you already addressed this in the Q&A, but I would really like folks to have a chance to hear about this too, in case they didn't read the conversation around technology and how you were navigating, especially some of the in-reach and one-on-one work that you were doing, especially when the pandemic hit, and some of the technology barriers that some of the people you're working with have. So the question was, what barriers or hiccups did you experience with the detention center prison system when COVID hit with regards to providing one-on-one peer and reentry work? And Philip, I would love if you could just kind of reiterate some of the things that you pointed out about the technology barriers.
Yeah. So it was really sad and it was heartbreaking, but I also believe that during that time, I was able to recruit some more humanizers and some more allies, because like I started like leveraging my own LinkedIn to start raising awareness about the barriers, and some of these employers are starting to see, some of these HR folks were starting to see like how hard it is. And so a person would get out, and our governor, just to be clear, he started releasing more people from prison, but they had to have a chronic illness to get released early. So with releasing more people that had chronic illnesses, mean you needed more people to help bridge the gaps to the healthcare resources, which also, amplified the need for more boots on the ground work. So it was really a cluster, y'all. And then you would have these providers that would want them to do a DocuSign. It's like, hold on, you want them to do a DocuSign? They're not tech savvy enough to get to the email to do the DocuSign. And so we had to be there to break this down, even for the healthcare providers, right? And they don't know no better. They're thinking, but that's what we come in at, as those advocates. And in recovery meetings, like a lot of the recovery meetings, they went to being on Zoom, and those recovery meetings on Zoom, it was hard for some of us who weren't returning citizens to connect the recovery meetings on Zoom. So that was another thing that we had to double down on, engaging folks, to see how they were doing, pulling up at halfway houses with our mask on, because we understood that, the opposite of addiction ain't recovery. The opposite of addiction is what? Connection. And so we had to double down on the principles. We had to double down on engaging the people. And another thing with the employers, they was doing Zoom job interviews. Yeah. Like, so a part of what one of the peer supports was on my team had to do was he had to basically use his laptop to get with the person who had a job interview. And so that could potentially be half a day, because you want to talk to them and get them make sure they're motivated about the job interview and all the regular parts of the peer support. But then you had to wait until they finished the job interview. So yeah, it was challenging, and sometimes it was discouraging. I seen it be discouraging to many. Just to be clear, like, I know some guys that have reoffended because they could not successfully reenter during the pandemic, and it's sad. But it's a sad, the pandemic brought a sad story to many of us in the United States of America and other countries as well.
Thank you, Kevin. Sorry, thank you, Philip. Kevin, this next question is around the stipends that you talked about. So kind of two questions combined here. One is, are stipends offered to participants during orientation and training? So that's part one. And the second part is, I think probably a lot of people in the audience have this question, any tips you can share about obtaining funding for stipends, search words that they should be looking for to identify funders, that sort of thing. Any strategies you can share?
Yes. So we structure our stipends and incentives around the milestones of our program, or just based on what we need, right? And oftentimes, it can be an uphill battle, an uphill climb to get enrollment and to also retain participants, at your orientation. Like, now that I've met you, I've assessed you, I've enrolled you, and I need to hold your attention. I think the ability to place those incentives, if you will, right, like at those key milestones of your program is important. And so let's say I could offer a stipend of $25 at the time of enrollment, and then maybe another $25 if you attend my info session. And then, but I think it's well spent in terms of outreach and recruitment and enrollment. But if I don't have the deep pockets, I'm really placing my stipends around GED attainment or the longer term milestones that revolve around like employment, right? If I have I think when I work with funders where they have the deep pockets, and I try, because I think it's important for this population where we're always advocating, and I'm like, well, how can I ask for the Cadillac of funding, of stipends, like, so that I can help somebody with housing, so that I can help somebody where their pain points are, right? Because the time that someone who was just released, that they're spending with us is very precious. In terms of funding, I have to say that I think at the beginning of this webinar, I think we were talking about how everyone is hiring, right? Everyone is hiring, and but they have a skills gap. They have some training issues that they have to employers that, like, until they're willing to provide some training directly or subsidize it, or they're working with community-based organizations where we are the ones who are seeking the grant funding, and we're working with the community colleges, or we're working with the labor unions who are able to provide this training at no cost or at less cost to the employers. I think when we're working with funders, there's an appetite for stipends and incentives, and I think we're moving towards it because of where we are with this labor market. That it's understood that yes, we're open to hiring those who might have a blemish, who might be justice impacted, who might have a background, and to do that, the funders are they're willing to carve out they will carve out that line for stipends and incentives.
Thank you.
Could I say one more thing on that, Eric, real quick? So I just put it in the chat. I was typing it, but one of the things that we're doing right now as we apply for grants to continue the work, whether it's with Opportunity Youth or Returning Citizens, and salute to Kevin and his team for adding the stipends. To close the skills gap, we need to have stipends in place, because everybody is hiring, and there's no incentive to go into a classroom. A lot of times the returning citizens, when they get out, if they go into a halfway house, they have to pay to be there. They got probation, they got child support, they got food, they got so many things they have to pay for, so there's no incentive to go into class. So I don't know if that's something that just throwing this idea out there, something that SAMHSA can collaborate with the Department of Labor and Health and Human Services, and just see that as a best practice for supporting returning citizens. Because this is untapped talent, right? This is a public safety issue. It's an economic issue. This is everybody. Maybe the super megazord is about to form between SAMHSA and HHS and Department of Labor and everybody. But that's what I'm thinking, like adding those to the RFAs, to where you have to have stipends in there for intro to machining, or some short-term advanced manufacturing credential, coding. There are so many short-term opportunities in the community college system that require 96 hours. You know what I'm saying? Maybe if we can add stipends, that will close the skill gap, and that will help the employers out as well.
Great point. So we're just about out of time. I'd like to ask both Kevin and Philip if they could just give us one parting thought. A couple of questions in the Q&A about getting employers on board, and a number of you in the audience expressed encounters with employers who might be reluctant to participate in some of these programs due to administrative barriers, maybe stigma around participating in programs. So I wanted to ask if you would each like to just give us one strategy or tip or final thought on getting employers on board.
Philip, do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you can go first.
Yeah, no, Thank you for this opportunity to be here. I really believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. And you know, in the evolution of the reentry programs at the National Urban League, you know, I've worked really hard to just build different types of partnerships. Like, I have like all of these different ideas like on the whiteboard. You know, I want to partner with, you know, these national transportation companies, work with the truck driving companies in this reentry space. That we've been doing it, but it's been my hope to be able to train just more truck drivers, because the country needs it and we need it. And but as we bring back a lot of jobs like in manufacturing and construction, and as we look to make things here in the US, part of that conversation has to come back to what Philip talked about earlier, which was diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not watering that down. And like, how can we tap into that space where, you know, just to help recover from the pandemic and to rebuild, you know, those are that's a huge area that I think about. On today's call, I've invited our affiliates to attend, and I've encouraged them to be a part of this. And you know, what I'm looking forward to next is, you know, our portfolio has grown and expanded, where maybe 10 years ago, I had one reentry program and we funded 2 affiliates. And now we have, you know, we have several programs that include like Pathway Home 3, the Young Adult Reentry Program. We have private funders, which is which is new to me, because, you know, it was always just, you know, the federal government was the only funder who wanted to fund adult reentry work. But now we have private funders who are willing to also support us and subsidize activities that we normally would not be able to do. And so, you know, to be able to be change agents, and I really believe that, you know, Philip is absolutely right. We all have to be change agents. I think working together with employers, with the One Stop, with the American Job Center, with the community colleges, with employers, just coming together with different allies that you might not think that you would ever work with. I think that is key to just for us to move forward and to more effectively reduce recidivism and address just the community violence issues that's hurting neighborhoods and communities across the country. So thank you for that. I'll pass it to Philip.
Yeah, and I'll just say, man, partner with purpose. You know, find them shared values. You know, all employers ain't good employers. You know what I'm saying? Just because they looking to fill a position don't mean that that's the best one to partner with. So building those relationships and partnering with purpose. Shared values is where it's at, you know what I'm saying? And when it's a humanizing person that's wanting to transform somebody's life and give an opportunity, bingo, those are the ones. And just go from there. But don't let it just be a numbers game, man, because these are people we dealing with, people that are going to turn around and be the living proof that recovery does happen. You know, people go to prison and they get out and they turn their lives around, you know, and we are contributing to that domino effect whenever we're transforming folks by way of these types of opportunities. So don't let it become a numbers game, and partner with purpose.
Thank you. And with that, we are coming to the close of today's event. Kevin Lee, Philip Cooper, thank you so much for today. I'd like to walk the audience through a couple of last housekeeping items. We do have that certificate available for people who would like to download it. Look out for it in the chat. It will be posted a couple of times there right now. And if we could go to the next slide. For anyone who is not already subscribed to the Gaines listserv, this is where we announce all of our webinars, opportunities for training, and other events. So I encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. And here is the website where you can just type in your information to receive our mailings. And next slide, please. We are just conducting the last poll for the day, and this is where you can give us feedback. We do share this feedback with SAMHSA, so we welcome any comments that you would like to give us here about further TA that you would find helpful related to today's topic. And finally, here is some contact information where you can reach us at the Gaines Center, and also reach the folks at SAMHSA. And with that, we are just going to leave the closing poll up for a couple of minutes, and we'll post the certificate in the chat a couple of more times. And once again, I'd like to thank our presenters today and everyone in the audience who participated to this really great conversation. And I hope you all have a great afternoon.